Next, we have two very impressive young men who have been part of the Environmental Law Program's Law Fellows program. Some of you know we have been fortunate through the generosity of various foundations and agencies to have established a law fellowship program that right now has 6 post-JD law fellows. Some would say embedded at the Department of Land and Natural Resources as junior attorneys, in-house attorneys. David Sokota's at Division of Aquatic Resources, John Foster's at DOCARE, Maria Gatos, who was around here earlier today, is at boating. We have 2 working on invasive species and another one that we're hiring right now. So John and David and I have been doing some traveling lately, and John started in January and dove right into the environmental court. And we've also been doing some traveling to find out what's going on in the neighbor islands. So John will give you an update, and we're very fortunate for all of his very hard work. So a lot of the effort that went into the bill this morning was these 2 fine gentlemen and their team at DLNR. So thanks, John.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. My name is John Foster. I am the legal fellow at DOCARE. It's the Division of Conservation and Resource Enforcement. It's the law enforcement agency that's tasked with enforcing all of these new laws that come through the environmental court. Most of the cases that I see come through district court. They're petty misdemeanors. I'm funded to pursue aquatics violations, but I see the state parks violations, the boating violations, which have an aquatic nexus as well. But one of the things that was apparent from the get-go when the environmental court was conceived and that the judiciary through its working group requested was flexibility in sentencing alternatives. Really just realizing that taking a one-size-fits-all approach to resource crimes doesn't really do justice to the nuanced nature and oftentimes the aggravating or mitigating factors that might come along with those crimes. So I've been observing district court as much as I can and been seeing a lot of those cases. So I may bring up a few examples along the way as I take you through basically the new asset law that Governor Ige signed into being this morning. So without further ado, let's start talking about it. So as I mentioned earlier, to begin with, the judiciary was restricted to fining defendants for resource cases. Oh.
Benny, slides, John?
How's that? All right, now we're cooking with gas. So the law as it stood before this morning restricted the judiciary to fining resource violators. And most of our statutes provide for a mandatory minimum fine, usually either $100 or $250. So it's not adaptable to the nuances inherent in many resource cases. We see a lot of cases where people just, for excusable reasons, didn't know that what they were doing was wrong. And so Senate Bill 2453 provides the judiciary with these additional sentencing tools. They can sentence offenders to an educational course in addition to or in lieu of a fine, or they can choose to substitute community service in lieu of the fine. So this is, really the purpose of giving the judiciary this flexibility is to allow judges to affect future behavior by crafting sentences that have a lasting impact. And a lot of the cases that I see in district court, they're not your typical defendants. They're people who don't have prior criminal histories. They're people who are impoverished, they're fishing for sustenance, so on and so forth. So the educational course, as I believe Denise Antolini mentioned this morning, the department has an educational curriculum that it's developed and that we use to train community partners who basically do neighborhood watch for shoreline areas. So the idea is to take this educational course and turn it into an online and eventually an in-person class, and use it to sentence offenders who just simply didn't know. And because Hawaii doesn't have a fishing license requirement, what we see with a lot of our aquatics violations is there's no educational course to take before you get your license. So people tend to be ignorant about areas of aquatic extractive use. So what this does is it allows us to catch some of these people on the back end. And rather than simply fining somebody for perhaps taking a female lobster, as one of these fellows in the photo may have done, we have the chance to sentence them to an educational course and teach them about the broad body of resource law. And so that's really important because it teaches them not just about the, why this activity is prescribed, but also about where it fits in the framework. And that's particularly important because a lot of our resource laws here in Hawaii are tied back to traditional Hawaiian management principles. So you can see in this picture, we have some guys, they're all holding lobsters, and does anyone know how to tell if a lobster is male or female? So a couple people, you can't tell when you're on top of the water and you're looking down on it. You have to swim down and grab the lobster and turn it over and look. And the swimmerlets that look like scales will be different on the males and the females, or the female may be full of eggs, in which case it's very apparent. But for that reason, we don't allow a take by spear because you usually spear it before you can identify the sex. And then lobsters are also pretty heavily regulated. We have a closed season, May through August, and take of females is always prohibited. So this is, unfortunately, lobster are not too common on Oahu anymore, but it's a pretty much a poster child case. Somebody go out and spear a lobster, just get excited and see it and say, I want to have a lobster for dinner. So community service is the other option that the judiciary now has. And for certain offenders, fines are just a cost of doing business. And I was going to use a sale of lobster, but actually, Judge Richardson, you gave me the perfect example with your presentation. Cost of doing business, these people that are operating in Kalalau, bringing in tourists for money or bringing in booze and selling it to tourists for money, they are making a lot of money. Not too long ago, you could go on Craigslist and get a ride into Kalalau for $200. And from what we hear, that's still going on today. So community service has a particularly promising deterrent effect here because when you sentence one of these offenders to a fine, they can pay it out of pocket and go back to making money. But if you hit them with a significant amount of community service, you take them off the water, you put a halt, even if it's just a temporary halt, to their commercial activity. And so the lost profits hurt these offenders a lot more than a fine. And we see that with a lot of our commercial marine dealers too. The other great thing about community service is it's restorative justice. And I believe, Justice Kumar, you were talking about dignity. And I think that resource-specific community service, it confers a benefit on the resource, but I think it also gives dignity to defendants to be able to work in the resource and to be able to say, I built that fish pond or I built that fence upland to protect native species. And so I think that it really empowers defendants and ties them to the resource. And we hope that it'll really reduce recidivism and give people a sense of really inherent pride in protecting the resource and hopefully change behavior that way. So some of the challenges that we're going to face from a departmental perspective with the asset program is our educational course. We face a lot of language barriers in district court. Plenty of our defendants who just didn't know are non-English speakers who weren't able to read the English signs. And so one of the things that we're very eager to do is to make sure that we adapt that educational course into other languages. And then we'd also like to have in-person courses for those people who lack internet access or don't use computers. And community service, right now we're looking for resource-specific community service partners. So I wanted to give a little plug if anyone knows nonprofit or government agencies that want to work with DLNR and the Judiciary to provide meaningful resource-specific community service opportunities. We're very eager to talk to you, talk to myself, David, or Denise. And we're also looking to make sure that we have broad coverage. We don't want to have people on Maui needing to travel to Oahu because we only have one community service partner here. And finally, the thing that community service partners should keep in mind is that there will be a need for supervision. So I ran out of time a little while ago, but I just wanted to say mahalo and fish pono. Thank you.